Welcome to the Proclaim podcast. My name is Eric Child, the director for Proclaim, which is a movement of our archdiocese here in Vancouver with the mission to awaken disciples to proclaim Jesus. And so welcome to our listeners and to anyone who has joined us for this episode. I'd love to introduce to you a colleague and a friend, Sister John Mary Sullivan, who is a Franciscan Sister of the Eucharist. We are so blessed here in Vancouver to have their community serve our archdiocese. So welcome, Sister. Thanks so much for being on podcast.
Absolutely. And I echo you in saying that we as a community are so blessed by the archdiocese, of our coworkers, and so many people we get to encounter through our ministry here. You've been on podcast before, and we've talked about the art of listening and how important it is within our relationships and even within the context of evangelization, leading people to Christ, but also in accompanying others in their own journey of discipleship and in their journey of life. There's so many ways in which we need people to accompany us in our journeys, in whatever stage that we're in. I'd love to start by just asking you, what's been your experience of being accompanied and those who have guided you and have helped you along your journey? Sure. I could actually, truly, I think our entire life is a life of being accompanied by another, from our parents to friends to professors. And maybe most significantly for me is being accompanied into a recognition of my own vocational call, and then formation in my call as a Franciscan Sister of the Eucharist. So those individuals that I encountered were so essential to who I am now and who I'm continue to be called forth to becoming. So I can look, probably my initial encounter with the first Franciscan Sister of Eucharist, and I clearly remember that encounter. There was just an immediate openness that I experienced in Sister Sarah. She didn't know me from Adam. She didn't have any particular investment in who I was or who I was becoming, but she was just simply open to that encounter and able to receive me in the limited way I was able to give myself. Yeah. Why did you feel so comfortable with her? It's a good question. There was, and this goes back to, I think, an essential aspect of accompaniment, an easefulness in her whole presence. And I never felt from the very beginning ever an agenda, that it was truly her being present to me. I felt truly all she desired was to come to know me. Okay. And I think just her whole way of interacting, her whole body presence spoke of that. Yeah. I'm going to ask you to recall a memory then of a time that you had a conversation with Sister Sarah? Sister Sarah. Sister Sarah. That's right. And what was her disposition like? How did she sit beside you? Did she make eye contact? What was the posture? All those things I think matters when it comes to that feeling free and open in an accompaniment relationship. I remember I can think of one example, perfect example of this is after a few months of studying at the institute where I was studying, and she was head of admissions there, I had a sense that she was someone I could go to no matter what I was struggling with. And I was struggling with something. And so I showed up at her door and knocked on the door. She opened it. And I said, Sister Sarah, do you have time to talk with me? I need a process. And she said, actually, I don't have time, but come in. And it was like this immediate, you are more important than anything else I was working on or need to get done. Yep. So that immediate just welcome and acceptance and that gave me a sense I'm that important, that she would put aside whatever she was working on. And then once again, an easefulness, whether it was eye contact or never just asking questions versus assuming what my thoughts were, what my worries were, just being very, very inquisitive about why I was there and what I needed. Yep. Yeah. And once again, never an imposition of of her thoughts, never an imposition of where she thought I should be going, but more just drawing it out for me, what my needs were.
Yeah. One of the questions that I asked you to consider or to ponder would be how in formation with Franciscans, accompaniment is interacted and played out, and to share some of those experiences, certainly experiences that I think could parallel or help the lay people understand the importance of accompaniment, and in particular how it relates with formation and our own, our own spiritual growth and all that.
Yeah, what I experienced within my own formation, I think a key component of it is that every young woman that comes through the formation process with our community, they really come from a different place. So our formators can't assume that we come from a formed background in our faith. Everyone is just at a different stage, different level of faith formation, even as they're discerning religious life. So once again, there's a way in which our formators very, very open to allowing us to reveal where we're coming from, the backgrounds we're coming from, very comfortable with us bringing our messiness, if you will.
Yeah.
Whether it's a messy family background or faith formation background or lack thereof. So I think that was so key, is never feeling like there was something I could not share or bring into the process of being accompanied in the formation process.
Okay. I'm gonna assume that our Proclaim listeners have a variety of pictures and definitions and thoughts around what it would be like to be in formation within a religious community. So some of our listeners might think classroom, you're on your own and you're meant to learn as much as possible.
That's right.
Others may have a more broader experience of doing life and sharing life, and meals is a moment of formation and like the rule of life and a way of prayer. So tell us a little bit more about how all of this integration of life contributed to the formation of the religious community.
Yeah, and it's probably similar, once again, entrance in the church. It's a gradual process.
Yeah.
So less formal, I would say, at the beginning.
Okay.
We might sit down with a sister and take some documents, but really the initial process of formation is more human formation. So as you said, having meals together, dialoguing at the meals, being able to bring any of the struggles that you're experiencing in life, have experienced life, and having someone you can speak to and talk through in that, and to begin to see where God is working in those moments.
Right.
So it's very much not formal initially in our formation process. In fact, your first stage, and we have a stage called pre-postulancy, where you literally are just living with the sisters. There's nothing that even distinguishes you other than a medal that you wear. You still have your normal job, but just the process of living with, getting into the rhythm of the community and getting a sense of that rhythm. There's things that you're invited to, other aspects that you're not invited to. So it's a gradual process of being introduced deeper and deeper into the community. There are things that you can come to but don't have to come to, which I think is very much translates into people who are interested in the faith, in the church as well. So it's a very gradual process, and in some ways paced by the young woman.
Okay.
Especially that initial stage, because there's no set time in that initial stage.
Okay.
So it's not like you have 6 months to figure this out, or you have a year. I mean, usually it's about a year.
Okay. You can't stay forever.
Exactly. At some point.
And then you stay forever.
Exactly. But it's a 9-year process before you stay forever.
That's right.
So it's a very gradual process. And in that initial stage, I would say very much paced by the sister or the young woman who's in their discernment. And then very personal connections to the sister who is the formator.
Right.
Where you really begin to feel known by someone within the community.
Okay.
That you're able to gradually share more and more intimately, not only your own life experience, but your experience in the faith, your experience with your relationship with God, how that's developing. And so having that personal connection with a sister, I think, is quite significant in that process.
Yeah, this is helpful for our Proclaim listeners because a lot of our listeners would be journeying with people in their lives, and for a lot of us, we would have people in our lives that we've known for our entire life or decades, and
That's right.
we would certainly have a great desire for them to know Jesus in a more intimate and personal way.
That's right.
And we have to be regularly reminded that it's at the pace that God unfolds in someone else's life, and it's up to them. It's their decision to move towards invitations that we might offer, or their awareness may grow in a pace that's not as not expected, or desired from us. But we have to be constantly reminded it's at their pace.
That's right. And to be comfortable with that, at ease with that once again, that never felt that there was an agenda. Like, this is when we need you to hit this mark, sister. It was very much a way of easefulness in terms of coming to, and in that, what it allows for is an authentic relationship, which then allows for a real sense of growing in a relationship, not just growing in knowledge and facts.
Okay.
Which is quite significant, because whether it's religious life or entrance in the church, it really comes back to a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And here's a practical application that I'm reminded of. Sometimes we think that we can't let people leave our parishes, and for whatever reason, they may feel that it's for them, they would need to make a choice to leave the parish, and sometimes we're holding on to them and we're saying you can't leave.
Yes.
And I think in the case of your community, it would actually be celebrated for someone to leave because you've given them the choice and the freedom to discern well, and we have to trust that God's moving in the individual and in our community and in your community.
Absolutely.
To say there might be a different path for that individual.
Absolutely. And in fact, during those initial stages of formation, one stage is called postulancy, which is questioning. It's a year of questioning. More intensely is this my call. And not only is it encouraged, it's almost like if you're not authentically questioning, then it's not an authentic process of discernment. And so I remember, it's sort of funny, I entered postulancy, and we get a tunic at that time. So I entered postulancy, and my biological sisters were there, so I was going to give them all my clothes. And one of the sisters, my formator, Sister Marcia, said, "Why don't you keep one outfit?" Oh. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'm not going to need this. And she said, "Just in case we mission you to China and you need to wear lay clothes." I said, "Okay." Now, what I come to realize later is she wanted to make sure that if she knew I had to authentically discern this, and if I discerned that I was not meant to be a Franciscan Sister at Eucharist, I needed at least one outfit.
Yeah, right, to walk out the door.
So I kept, the funny thing is I ended up going to Hong Kong and needing to bring one outfit in case we went to mainland China.
Okay.
She was intuitive in that way. But I think it goes back to, it's really important that a person feels they are discerning from a place of freedom.
Yeah. Okay.
And once again, freedom to leave a parish, freedom to discern out of religious life. And sometimes it's not even for us, like our sisters really desire that the young women come to know in what way Christ is calling them to live the most authentic life that they have been called to. And so it could be a different community.
Yeah.
It could be, we really see that you could potentially have a Dominican spiritual.
I would anticipate that your community celebrates
Absolutely.
an individual who has moved closer in their relationship and intimacy with the Lord.
Yes.
But discerns out of your community.
Absolutely.
That's a complete win, if you will.
And that there is a sense of that the young woman truly believes that you're celebrating that, is that they in some ways remain in relationship.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there's many religious sisters from different communities that we have known and remained good friends with, but also women who have left, entered marriage, and their families are very much involved with our community.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we celebrate any which way in which they're growing in their vocation, growing in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And so, yeah. And I imagine that's the case too. Someone may discern, this is not the place where I'm going to come fully alive in my faith. Another parish is, and yet there won't be a sort of a fraction there of relationship.
Yeah. There can be a cultural influence within any community that might speak otherwise. So I think for religious communities and for parishes, there has to be some intentionality that is brought forward. So I'm curious, would you have any particular examples of how Franciscan community would have, and perhaps the formators that in your experience would have, I guess, one, continue to encourage your freedom in the discernment, and then the second would be to spark the questions and the curiosity. And you talked about how the individual, the postulant, would you're looking for them to continue to be asking more and more questions.
Yeah, and I think that intentionality is key. It's that regular connection, so that you're not left alone, even in your questioning. That on a regular basis, I'm meeting with one of our sisters. And because they've had experience of religious life in so many years in formation, they sometimes know what we're grappling with almost before we do. And I think that may be true too with those who are called to accompany others in the faith. They may understand a sort of depth of what the other may be encountering for the first time and grappling with for the first time that they can't even formulate or put words to. And so once again, regular, consistent meeting, walking with, and then being able to ask the right questions that allows the individual to begin to formulate for themselves what their experience is.
I'm going to go a little bit off topic here, sister.
Okay.
But I think it'll come back to our topic of accompaniment and listening and such. Over the years, you have shared stories of some of the older sisters in your community and how they have formed you, but also some fun stories and their experiences. It's been, some of them are pretty wild. I have to say, I've really enjoyed.
I better be careful here.
I've really enjoyed and have been edified by those stories. And perhaps what might be, in some of our parish communities, what might be missing is both the willingness of our younger Catholic disciples to receive mentorship and to receive some of the impartation of the older generation. And also what might be missing is the older generation not so much, or perhaps not being aware that they have wisdom to offer and a platform to impart that wisdom to our younger generation. So we lose out. And that's why I wanted to maybe hear some of your thoughts, because being part of the community, it's kind of built in, right? Your formators are years and sometimes decades ahead of you in terms of their involvement and their learning and journey within the community, and then they impart that into your life.
Yes, that's right.
So any thoughts to that? Yeah,
well, one thing just that came immediately to mind is the importance to recognize that it's not simply the formators that form.
Yes.
So yes, there's official sisters who have been missioned in and designated as our official, but every sister I lived with has formed me in one way or another. And in particular, when I've had chance to live with sisters who literally have been in religious life for 70 years. And often it's their presence that forms more than anything else. It's not even what they say, but we call it actuating presence. Their very being forms us. Because of how they lived and the joy that they continued to live with. And I think about, like, within our parishes, this may be something to really think about, is intergenerational gatherings where you have some of your parishioners who have lived fully their lives as Catholics, have a tremendous joy within them, and they may not be formally on the RCIA team, but their impact on ones who are curious about the faith could be tremendous. Tremendous. We have sisters down in Oregon, and our oldest living sister, she's 96 years old, Sister Helen Jean. And truly, all you have to do is sit with her and have a meal with her, and you're transformed in that moment. She forms you in her very presence. And what we could teach the world in terms of what our church could offer, in terms of really acknowledging the great gift we have in those who have lived the faith profoundly, to encounter our youth, to engage with our youth. It could be so good.
I'm recalling a memory of a daily mass that I went to, and I brought my young kids. So one of my sons, he was altar serving, and our sacristan, who happens to be the father of one of our priests here in the Archdiocese as well, he's an older gentleman, and so 70-year-old gentleman with my little 10-year-old boy, and they're altar serving together. And this is his first time altar serving on his own. And so he was guiding him and moving him around and telling him to ring the bells and don't light that candle, and just moving him around the altar. It was a beautiful scene. And that really is only just a taste of what could be a more intergenerational relationship within our parish communities, where not only are you just being told how to serve well, but now how to live well. Live well,
yeah, and that's so key, because once again, our faith isn't about knowledge. Our faith isn't about just having factual information about the church. Or as our Holy Father, Pope Benedict XVI said, it's not about moral norms or way of doing things, but it's about a relationship, living it fully. So how do we help others who are curious about the faith recognize I'm being called into a relationship, not simply knowledge about the church.
There is a scripture verse that we use in Proclaim very regularly. It's from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. So it's easy to remember, 2 Timothy 2:2. But the words are a little harder to remember, right? You got to memorize scripture. But it says it's St. Paul's talking to Timothy, and what you have heard from me through many witnesses, entrust to faithful people who will have the ability to teach others as well.
Isn't that beautiful?
And what I'm hearing from your witness and from your story is that there were many witnesses within the Franciscan community, not only your formator, but the entirety of the community who poured into you and formed you, and then also expected you to do the same amongst not only your peers, but then those who were going to come before you or after you.
Yeah. And I have to say, what we've experienced within our community is young women who, say, are discerning or even just want to know a little more about religious life. They are absolutely drawn to our older sisters. Even though, we might go out and, play ultimate with them and, have a deep theological discussion with them, they are drawn to our older sisters who have lived it, our wisdom figures that and I also think our older sisters, once again, have a tremendous gift of making space for the other, of just in their quiet presence, allowing the other to, there's that, I think I might have quoted it, there's a beautiful line, listen another into being. And you just really feel that they have a gift to listen to the other. And young women are drawn to that because of that.
That's wonderful. We're going to slightly adjust our direction of the conversation and continue the theme of accompaniment. And in particular, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the art of listening and how we can grow as listeners in accompanying others. And you've done a podcast for Proclaim before, and you've done workshops on the art of listening. So we've heard and we've had time to talk about it. But I thought what we could do is we're going to geek out a little bit. And I'm going to read a little paragraph from Evangelii Gaudium, which is, I think, a regular reference point for Proclaim. And I'm gonna read this, and it has to do with listening, and then we'll just pull out some thoughts and maybe some words or themes that that catches your ear. Sure. So this is from Evangelii Gaudium, paragraph 171. Today more than ever, we need men and women who, on the basis of their experience of accompanying others, are familiar with processes which call for prudence, understanding, patience, and docility to the Spirit, so that they can protect the sheep from wolves who would scatter the flock. We need to practice the art of listening, which is more than simply hearing. Listening in communication is an openness of heart, which makes possible that closeness without which genuine spiritual encounter cannot occur. So, anything that stand out from that?
I think I've read this quote before. I've heard this quote before. The line, the listening, not just hearing, is so key, because there's a way in which to really listen to another is to have the other feel like they are being heard, that they're being received. And very different than just hearing the words, but receiving the very person in this encounter. And that's so key as we try to accompany, that the other individual feels received in the fullness of who they are, in spite of maybe their weaknesses, in spite of all that they come with, the burdens they come with. And also the joys they come with, that you really are just accepting the individual. I think that's so important, because it also references process. Each person comes in a different place of process, and to be comfortable with receiving someone in a particular area of process, a time of process, and then being willing to let that unfold versus having, once again, an agenda of where they need to be, whether it's in a few weeks or a year or down the road.
I find it very difficult in my role as a father and a husband and a manager and all these different roles or kind of relationships that I have to put myself into a mental space where I can just listen, because there's the voice in my head that's also coming up with what am I going to say next? I have an answer for you.
Exactly.
I want to respond. There's and there's also not just in my mind that's occurring. There's probably also like this part of my body that just wants to say something rather than to listen. So, any thoughts to helping our listeners who are resonating with what I just shared?
Absolutely.
To help with that ability to deeply listen.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think it's really important for whoever's in the place of that receiving, listening stance, that we do get comfortable with the silence.
Yeah.
That it's in that silence that allows an individual to actually go deeper in terms of their ability to share. I think it also allows us, and I think this is really important, to hear maybe the deeper question that is underneath the initial question.
Right.
Or the initial doubt that they put forth. Someone may come, especially early on, who has a preconceived notion of the church and has all kinds of concerns and questions. But if we're too quick to respond, we don't really get to what's underneath those questions. You know?
I had a mentor parent challenge me one time, and they said, well, the next time you talk to one of your daughters, see if you can only ask questions.
Yeah.
And the experience was quite eye-opening. To hear more of what they were thinking, and to let them talk it out, and to let their thoughts navigate our conversation.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it makes you stop coming up with solutions, because in order to ask a question, you really have to listen to what their question and their concerns are.
I can't just ask a random question.
And when someone asks you a question, it means, you actually heard what I'm saying, and you're coming, which is helpful. Like, to keep in mind, all right, ask the question. It will help you not come up with the solution or thing, which is very, very important. And then it also makes you listen.
Yeah.
Because when we're coming up with solutions, sometimes we come up with solutions of the initial question, but we never actually listen to what the actual question is. And so we hit on a surface level that doesn't capture what the person is actually struggling with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because if we're accompanying those who are not living out intentional discipleship, so that they don't know Jesus, or they don't know know him well enough. And we're trying to help them discover what's occurring in their life and in their minds and their hearts, the curiosity or the seeking or whatever, wherever they are in their relationship with God. They may not have language to put to the things that they're experiencing. And so they'll ask questions within contexts and domains that they are familiar with.
That's right.
Even though the underlying question might be coming from another place.
Absolutely.
And so our questions and are like gently and with charity, digging a little bit could unearth some of the areas that they just wouldn't have put topics or language or any kind of awareness into place. And our role in that is to help them discover that. And then perhaps those are where more of the meaningful connections to faith could come into play.
And I do, it's so easy within the church. We have language that we become very accustomed to, that we sometimes forget. People are, it's like experiencing a foreign language when they come into relation, or even are curious about the faith. They don't have the language. So if we even start to answer questions from the language of the church, which they're not accustomed to, not only we may not be getting to the depths of their question, but even if we're answering them correctly, they're not going to be able to understand what we're saying, because it's a foreign language to them. It truly is. And so once again, slowing down, letting them answer a question, and then even it's like you have to work on translating. It's like, hear how they're speaking, try to understand what they mean by a word they're using, a question they're asking, and then to begin to even translate our own language into a language that they can comprehend and work with.
Yeah, just the other night we were doing an accompaniment masterclass with a group of parents, and one of the kind of hypothetical situations, although it happens sometimes, that we wrestled with, was a parent coming to us and asking the question, how do I get baptized? And the exercise was not to immediately answer that question, but to now dig deeper. Why are you asking? What is it that you in fact are looking for? Because some people might be looking for like unity in their family, but may not really understand what baptism offers.
That's right.
So they may not know Jesus at all and the saving sovereignty that he presents.
That's right.
And others might actually be genuinely looking for the sacrament.
The sacrament.
And everything in between.
Yes. Yeah. And know fully what they're asking for, whereas, like you said, there's some who probably Googled baptism and said, this is how you enter the church, and so they come with the word.
So how do I get baptized?
Exactly.
And they don't even know what it means.
How does this work? Exactly.
Exactly. So the temptation could be to say, well, okay, RCIA is this, and then the rite of acceptance is this, and you're going to go through some scrutinies, and then you got to go to the archbishop, and there's all these things, and they're like, what's an archbishop?
Exactly. What are you talking about? And I think also, there's a way in which, once again, we have sort of these formal stages, right? Someone could come to us and this is hard within the parish, because you have the formal stages that are important. What do you do with someone who comes in the middle of the year, out of sync with the RCIA program, and says, I want baptism? And then are we prepared either to adjust and allow people to go through at different, or someone who can honestly accompany them to when the next entry point is, that's also, I think, really important as they come to us.
And that comes back to your point of having a formal formator within your community, and then the entirety of the community forming you.
That's right.
And so to our listeners, who I'd say the majority, if not all, are parishioners. Yes. You may not be a part of an RCIA team, but you are part of RCIA. Absolutely. Because many of you have interactions with individuals, parents, those who are in the church, far from the church, that are seeking sacraments or are seeking more meaningful relationship with God. And so you do have the privilege and the responsibility to be able to guide them.
That's right. Yeah. And to continue to walk with them even in the non-formal stages of formation. And I always love the quote from Pope John Paul II. He says, I think it's in Fides et Ratio, his encyclical letter, that we come to know God and to trust in God through another. Yeah. And so those relationships at the parish, especially I would say almost those informal relationships, if we desire, what we truly desire for each person is to come to know God on a deep level and come into relationship, then we have both the privilege and the obligation to receive them and to walk with them and to be the one that helps them to grow in trust with God and to know Him.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the quote because there was a line that said, we need to be familiar with processes in our capacity to listen and accompany others that call for prudence, understanding, patience, and docility to the Spirit.
That's right.
Any thoughts on any of those particular areas?
Yeah. Well, I think prudence itself is really, really important because once again, we don't know where people are coming from. We don't know their life situations. If we are too quick to move them through a process, we can actually, in the end, turn them away from the church. Yeah. So that, and I would say what would be helpful if you really are being called to accompany someone, that you always have that tied into other relationships within the parish. That's part of prudence, right? Is that you're not the sole person feeling the obligation and the responsibility to bring this person into relationship with Jesus Christ. We are part of a parish community, and what's prudent is to make sure that you're tying an individual into the community.
That's right.
Because it's not prudent for them to get so connected to you that when you disappoint them, they're done with the church. Yeah, that's good. And that's so easy to do because out of goodness of our heart, we just want to give ourselves so completely to this individual that we may not even realize that what we're doing is imprudently having them more attached to us than to Jesus, having them more attached to us than the community.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we talk a lot about in Proclaim around invitations. And so one of the invitations could be to come to a Knights of Columbus pancake breakfast. Most parishes have them. And it isn't just so that you have a chance to get to know the individual or the family, but it gives you an opportunity to introduce them to the wider parish community.
That's right.
Let me introduce you to this individual and this family, and you can see their faces, and you put names to faces.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
And why that's also important because the individual, once again, if it's any one person that they put all their hope and trust in, we're going to fail. It's just, we're going to fail.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think also to recognize that for our pastors and our priests, that they also are going to fail at times. And so once again, if they can get tied into a whole community, it's not the disappointment that happens because Father didn't acknowledge me or this person didn't recognize me. It's like a whole community is there to hold them through that.
Yeah, that's good. It acknowledges our weaknesses, but it also acknowledges the strength that we all bring to the life of the community. Exactly. It also could offer more opportunities for proclamation many
That's right.
parishes run different programs
That's right.
that can, present the gospel in a meaningful way. So it's not on you to have to think about how am I going to share my faith with another, and to think about how to, systematically do it in a meaningful way that could
That's
lead
right.
someone to a decision. We have programs, and a lot of parishes are starting to think of ways in which they can introduce people into a discipleship relationship
That's right.
with Jesus.
Yeah, and I was thinking in a parish community, whether it's through different programs, the other aspect is process, right? We meet people in different stages, coming out of different life situations, and so say we have a young single mother who has a certain life experience. How great it would be if within your parish community you have disciples that have had the same experience.
Yes.
Another mother, a single mother, maybe a few years ahead, and have lived the struggles that this young woman has, and can accompany in a different way than I would be able to accompany that young woman. So that's where, once again, the parish community to have just each person, both in their areas of strength, and I push this a lot, but I really believe this, in our areas of woundedness and seemingly weakness, can be those areas that allow us to accompany another through a process that we alone can, because we've lived what they have lived, we've struggled through what they have struggled. And so I think that's really important in a parish community, to draw individuals into accompaniment who may feel they're not worthy because of their own life experience. But how good it is to have people from all kinds of situations be part of that.
Yeah, and you shared that even with your own experience with the Franciscan community.
Yes,
and I'll come back to the quote. It speaks about that on the basis of their experience of accompanying others and life experience. I think that makes sense. I think the encouragement that I would offer to our Proclaim listeners is that if you haven't considered yourself as an accompanier of others, reconsider it, because if you are in your parish community and you talk to other people, then you're accompanying someone. And whether you are doing it intentionally or not, you're also influencing by your words and your behaviors and the way in which you connect with others. And so I think it's an invitation for us to all reflect on that and to think about, is my connection and accompany of others drawing them closer to our parish community and drawing them closer to God? And if I can't say yes or no to that, it might be a next question to say, what can I intentionally do to be an encourager of our community, or to an encourager of someone that is journeying and seeking their own relationship with God?
So good.
So, Sister, I'm going to land the plane on our conversation. I'm going to ask you the question: is there something you would love to share with our Proclaim community?
Sure. I imagine those who are listening are in some ways already very much involved in accompanying our discipleship. What I really would encourage, that in their role, in your role as leaders within the parish community, to keep your eyes open, not only for those who are seeking accompaniment, but those within your parish communities that don't feel they can accompany. That really be aware of, there's so many people in your parish community that can serve as in accompaniment in ways they may not even know themselves. And so to really draw that out, there's no one person that is the model to be, and once again, that goes back to my religious experience in community life. Our sisters are so different. Each of them have different skills, different temperaments, just different ways of seeing life. And I know that every single one of them that I've encountered has formed me, has helped me walk and enter into a more deeper relationship with Jesus Christ. And so that's true at your parish. So really, I encourage you just to keep your eyes open, to find ways to draw others into the ministry of accompaniment. They're there, and whether they're in their 90s or even the child that's maybe 6 years old, they have a capacity to accompany.
Wonderful. Sister, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. As I mentioned earlier, you and the community have been a gift to our archdiocese. And so to our Proclaim listeners, if you liked the episode, please consider sharing it with someone in ministry, in your parish, with your pastor. Be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast. You'll get updates on new episodes. And as always, Proclaim is ready to serve you in the mission to proclaim Jesus in your homes and in your community. So feel free to reach out at any points. You can visit us at WeAreProclaim.com. Sister, once again, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. It was my pleasure, and I'll keep you all in my prayers.
Amen.
Amen.